made it apparent that my only choice when it came time for college was tech school, not because it fit with my hobbies, they never inquired about those, but rather because it provided the quickest path to a well-paying career. At every stage, they made sure I realized the extent of their sacrifice by taking out loans and spending down what little savings they had. Mom used to say, "We're eating ramen so you can have a future." But oddly, there was always money for Perry's newest pastime or adventure. Tech school was harsh due to the continual pressure from home as well as the challenging homework. I lived on the cheapest possible diet, worked part-time at a computer repair business in between classes, and was constantly reminded of my parents' investment in me. Every phone conversation featured an update on their financial difficulties as well as overt clues about when I might be able to reimburse them. Perry, meanwhile, left high school during her last year. In fact, my parents applauded her choice rather than the drama I would have experienced. "Not everyone is cut out for school," they stated. "She is courageous for pursuing her own goals." She spent the following years exploring her options, which included working as a barista, store clerk, dog walker and yoga instructor trainee, all of which were part-time positions that lasted no longer than a few months. Until she eventually quit because it wasn't fulfilling her soul, every new job she took was hailed as her genuine calling. I was hired by a burgeoning tech startup after I graduated from computer school. Although the pay wasn't particularly noteworthy by industry standards, it was more than my family had ever received. I recall phoning my parents to break the news, hoping for a single unadulterated moment of joy. Rather, Dad started figuring out how much I could give them per month right away, and Mom started making a list of all the bills they needed assistance with. To save money, I moved into a small apartment with 2 roommates. Although it wasn't ideal, I was earning enough money to buy a home of my own. I felt compelled to live simply in order to support my parents. I tried to balance their needs with my student loan payments and other living expenditures by sending them money each month. However, it was never sufficient. Dad would call with a remorseful speech about how they had given up everything for my schooling if I didn't send an extra month. My work became my haven. I poured myself into projects, gained a reputation for solving challenging issues, and began to advance in the company. Every bonus or promotion ought to have been a triumph, but instead they served as further sources of pressure. "So, you'll be able to help us more now, right?" was the constant inquiry, rather than "Are you proud of yourself?" or "What are your goals?" Perry's pattern of irregular employment and snap judgments persisted. When things went apart, she would return home after living with friends. She would enroll in online classes but stop midway through. Our parents were understanding and supportive of every setback. Despite the fact that she was well into her 20s, they would exclaim, "She's still young. She simply hasn't discovered her calling yet." What I assumed would be a typical Sunday meal at their rental apartment was actually the pivotal moment. Although I had been picking up on more clues than usual regarding their financial difficulties, I wasn't ready for what happened next. After all these years of investing in the family's future, Dad began to talk about how tired they were of renting, how their landlord was raising the rent once more, and how they needed a place of their own. The directness still took me by surprise, even though I understood where this was going. "Honey, we've been thinking," Mom replied, reaching across the table and taking my hand. "We've given up so much for you to reach this point, and you're doing fantastically now. Do you not think it's time to assist us in purchasing a home?" They let go of years' worth of pent-up guilt when I revealed that I was struggling to pay my own rent and save for the future. Dad talked about how they could have invested in me rather than saving for retirement. Mom sobbed as she talked about how all they wanted in their last years was stability. Perry, who was residing with them at the time, said that I was living comfortably while our parents were having financial difficulties. Months passed during the pressure campaign. They casually mentioned places they had seen in every phone conversation. Dad would share tales of their friends' kids who had done right by their parents by purchasing properties, while Mom would email ads just to look at. Perry even got involved, writing to me to say that after everything our parents had done for me, they deserved this one thing. Despite my best efforts, I was susceptible to their manipulation due to decades of indoctrination. The guilt became too much. Their age, their sacrifices, and their need for stability would keep me up at night. Though years of familial dynamics are difficult to overcome, my therapist, yes, I did finally start seeing one, warned me about setting limits. I finally gave in after months of psychological combat. I persuaded myself that this was the proper thing to do even though I had saved up a respectable sum for a down payment, money that ought to have gone toward my own future. The guilt trips would end once they had a home, I promised myself. At last, they would be content and I could begin to concentrate on my own life. I purchased a basic 3-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood, nothing extravagant. The monthly payments were difficult, but I reasoned that if I kept up my thrifty lifestyle and lived with roommates, I could manage. Everything appeared to be going well for the first several months. My parents were ecstatic, telling friends and relatives how well their son had done them and showing off their home. However, the requests increased rather than decreased. They wanted to landscape the backyard because the neighbors would judge us, and they required new furniture because the old stuff doesn't seem right in this magnificent house. Every request was accompanied by the same old guilt trip. After everything we've done for you. I continued to pay my mortgage, sending more when I could in an effort to pay it off sooner. I convinced myself that it was worthwhile to provide my parents with the security they had never had, even if I was still living with roommates and putting my own life on hold. They began discussing how nice it would be for Perry to have a secure location close by, and they made casual references to how she was assisting them in settling in, but I chose to ignore the warning flags. In hindsight, I ought to have anticipated this. I was so used to prioritizing their demands that I failed to notice all the warning signs. The events that followed compelled me to face the ugly truth of my family's relationships and make one of the most difficult choices of my life. Update 1. I'll tell you what transpired when I paid a surprise visit to the house I purchased. I wish I could say I was shocked by what I discovered, but perhaps I had a sneaking suspicion this kind of stuff was coming. It all began one weekend when I attempted to phone my folks to talk about the additional mortgage payments I had been making. They never missed an opportunity to discuss money, so it was strange that neither of them answered. I made multiple efforts before deciding to drive to the residence. Everything changed because of what I discovered there. Wearing pajamas as if she owned the home, Perry answered the door. She didn't say, "Hey, nice to see you," or even, "What's brought you here?" Rather, she asked, "Oh, what are you doing here?" With an irritated expression, as though I were breaking her schedule. As I stood there, I tried to take in everything I was seeing. I felt sick to my stomach when I entered. The entire house has been converted into Perry's private area. Her personal portraits had taken the place of our family photos on the walls, her clothes were draped over the furniture and her art supplies were strewn all over the table that had once been our parents' dining room table. She was allegedly now a budding social media personality, and the spare room had been transformed into some sort of creative studio for her latest business endeavor. "Where's Dad and Mom?" I was able to inquire while attempting to remain calm. She answered nonchalantly, as though everyone knew, "Oh, they moved out a few weeks ago. Across town, they discovered a pleasant rental. Did they not inform you?" Certainly they hadn't informed me. No one had considered mentioning that Perry had moved in and my parents had left, even though I had been making extra mortgage payments on this place. I felt like I was physically struck by the betrayal. I contacted my folks while seated on the couch, which was now adorned with Perry's throw cushions. This time, Mom responded, and her justification infuriated me. "We planned to inform you, honey. We believed this would be the ideal setting for Perry, who required a steady setting to concentrate on her career. You're doing great, and she needs time to figure out what she wants to do." Mom's voice took on that recognizable guilt-tripping tone when I brought up the fact that I was the one making the mortgage payments. "Can't you help your sister after all we've given up for you? Your additional payments will be used to cover our new rent. Everything remains within the family." I lost it at that point. Remains with family? I didn't buy this house to give Perry a free crash pad. I bought it for you and Dad. And without notifying me, you're paying your rent with my extra mortgage payments? In an attempt to manipulate me, Mom broke down in tears and said that I was being self-centered and that family members should support one another. After I obtained my IT job, Dad got on the phone and started lecturing me about how I've changed and gotten materialistic. The actual kicker? The majority of their furniture had already been transferred into their new rental, leaving Perry with the more recent pieces I had assisted them in purchasing for the property. I was the one who was really footing the bill, and they had planned this entire event without ever contacting me. "I'm focusing on building my brand right now," Perry responded with a shrug when I questioned her about her involvement in the mortgage. She replied, "I'll be able to help out once I get my social media following up," as she opened a new ring light that she was probably buying with the additional cash I had been giving for the mortgage. I alternated between anger and incredulity during the drive home. The family first lectures, guilt trips and years of manipulation were all meant to keep me footing the bill while I put my own life on hold. I've been allowing myself a few days to calm down and gather my thoughts before deciding what to do next. A part of me wants to halt all payments right away and let them face the repercussions. Fighting against years of training and worrying about being the bad son who left his family is another aspect. However, one thing is certain, this cannot go on. I have had enough of being the family ATM. This weekend, I've planned a meeting with my parents to establish some clear guidelines. Perry must either start making a sizable mortgage payment or something will need to change. I'll provide